Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty leagues, PPR leagues, IDP leagues, even daily fantasy football leagues. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Marcus Vargas, and quite frankly, let's just get right into it, guys. So, I know we're trying to keep this sports related and, specifically fantasy football and football related, but I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't bring up coronavirus. So, guys, this situation is it's getting pretty out of control. It seems like we don't ever really know what the facts are, what we should be doing, and I will admit the media definitely is causing a panic. However, I cannot remember a time, and I mean, if anyone knows, definitely comment below, a time when basically every major sport or every sport in the country was being canceled, suspended, or on hiatus for the same reason. It's very, very complex, the situation at hand. It seems like, a lot of times, especially in this day and age, people make jokes of these sorts of things. It's sort of like a meme culture, if you will. Every time something bad happens, people want to make a joke of it, and it's sort of to keep things light and, to not be so depressing all the time about things, but sometimes that could be a detriment. If it seems like not a lot of people were taking the virus very seriously until you see, Rudy Gobert has coronavirus, and then that's when it kind of hit. You could kind of feel the shock in the system. And then you find out Tom Hanks has coronavirus and his wife, and then it's like, wait a second. It seems like people needed to put a face to the virus, didn't actually think that it was serious, and now, everyone's running to their grocery markets, nobody's going outside, so these sorts of things can definitely get scary and out of hand, but the important thing is that everyone remains, I won't say calm, because I understand that the thing causes anxiety, and, everyone's nervous to go outside and be around others, but, remain practical, guys. It's not as huge of a thing as the media is making it. It's not the end of the world at the moment, and you can prevent yourself from catching coronavirus, and all you have to do, wash your hands, be hygienic, make sure you're not around people who are sick. If you are sick, stay indoors and sort of self-quarantine. It's unfortunate, but right now there are literally no sports to watch on television. I mean, NCAA March Madness is canceled, for crying out loud. So that should just show you guys, this is a pretty serious thing when billion-dollar industries are willing to lose money, and lots of it. So it's all pretty crazy, like I said. And, the only thing that I can, there's like one ray of light is that as of right now, the NFL doesn't plan to postpone the beginning of their season. Of course, teams right now are taking precautionary measures, and a lot of their staff aren't traveling. Scouts aren't going to places, to pro days and things of that nature. And all I can say is hopefully that this doesn't affect the NFL draft, but honestly, expect it to. How that affects, our team's going to draft at home? Is there going to be no, whole gathering of all the players and their families at the draft? We don't know right now, but hopefully teams can still draft those rookies that they want. Hopefully the coronavirus isn't going to affect, where people want to play as free agents, and everything can just sort of get back to normal as quickly as possible. However, last show I recently talked about the XFL and whether, it was sustainable and whether they would keep success. And unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, the XFL has suspended the rest of its regular season. Now, it plans to return in 2021. However, I don't know if there's much hope for it at this point. People didn't even get to see a full regular season. It was so without many games, it's hard to get attached, one, to the teams, and two, to the players. One great thing that the XFL is doing is they're allowing their players to sign NFL and CFL contracts immediately, which is, kudos to them. It's a great move. Well, one, it's great for PR, and two, it's just great, from a human standpoint. These guys still need to work, and some of them have, earned a shot at possibly making an NFL or CFL team. So that's really good to see, because a lot of people are in, a state of panic, chaos, and quite frankly, a lot of these shows and types of podcasts aren't going to have much to talk about in the coming weeks. There will literally be no games at all to be played. The only thing that there will be left to talk about, most likely, is either the coronavirus, when it's going to end, and, the NFL offseason. So it's a really rough time, and, we just all got to stick together and get through it, And, of course, I urge everyone to stay safe, take the proper precautionary measures, and we'll all get through this, of course. So, with that, let's get into some football talk, some fantasy football talk, and, let's continue with the show as normal. So, guys, the first thing I want to talk about, because it's everywhere, Tom Brady to the Buccaneers. Now, if you guys listened to the last show, you'll probably remember me specifically stating that the Buccaneers were one of the teams that I didn't think was realistic for Tom Brady to go to. And now all of a sudden, headlines are being made. The Buccaneers are prepared to go, quote, all in for Tom Brady during the free agency period. Now, guys, my opinion still hasn't changed on the matter. I still think that this doesn't make sense for Tom Brady, and I'm not sure it really makes sense for the Buccaneers as well. I mean, do you guys really believe that if Tom Brady goes to the Buccaneers, they have a shot at winning the Super Bowl? I mean, the NFC is absolutely stacked, and the Buccaneers, I don't know. I just don't see it. To me, it doesn't make sense, and to be honest, well, here's another reason why. Jameis Winston, they should have hope in him to get better. Now, I know the LASIK eye surgery, people made a meme of it for a while, but that actually really might help him. I mean, if the guy couldn't see 40 yards down the field, don't you think it would be very difficult to throw the ball accurately? I just don't know if the Buccaneers should be giving up on Jameis Winston just yet, because yes, he threw a ton of turnovers. But have we ever seen someone throw that many turnovers and that many yards? It's kind of ridiculous. 5,000 yards with 30 interceptions? Think about that. Had he lowered his turnover rate, he would have even more yards and be even more prolific of a passer. So right now, I don't think it's in the Buccaneers' best interest to sign a 43-year-old quarterback when you have one that is pretty prolific and with the right coaching and hopefully with better vision, can be one of the top 10 guys in the league at quarterback. I think teams like, the Chargers that just got rid of their franchise guy, teams unlike the Raiders that have a guy there who isn't that bad, should be going for Tom Brady, not people with, younger guys who are sort of projects. Someone like the Bears, maybe, where their quarterback has shown that he is just not up to par and just can't play at an elite level. To me, this doesn't make sense. Even if the money is right for Tom Brady, I wouldn't go to the Buccaneers because I don't believe that they would be giving me the best chance to win a Super Bowl in what could be my final year, even, not just my final 2 years. So, guys, my stance is not changing on that. That's just the way it is. The Buccaneers are a bad idea. However, if he does end up on the Buccaneers for fantasy football's sake, he's going to light it up, guys. Chris Godwin is still there. Mike Evans is still there. And, Brady wasn't abysmal with the horrible arsenal he had in New England. So if he goes to Tampa Bay, Definitely shoot him up your draft boards. Well, I'm not saying, top 3 quarterback, but he's definitely going to be better than 12th overall quarterback, which even last year when people said he had the worst year of his career, basically, is not that bad. So, like I said, just to reiterate before the break, from a football standpoint, if he wants to win Super Bowls, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to me right now don't make that much sense. It doesn't make sense for Tom Brady. It doesn't make sense for the Buccaneers, really. But for fantasy football, yeah, managers can expect a significant boost in value if Tom Brady goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, of course, it's a win and a lose. But, hey, if he goes there, guys, it's good for us, unless you're a Patriots fan. So with that, we'll go on a short break, guys, and we'll be right back. We're going to talk Pat Mahomes. We're going to talk some fantasy football as well. So, like I said, stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everybody, to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Just to give a quick recap, we just got done talking coronavirus and Tom Brady to the Buccaneers. And now, because I haven't talked about him that much, I want to move on to my guy, Patrick Mahomes. Now, I really don't think there's a debate. Patrick Mahomes is by far the best quarterback in the NFL. And especially when you consider his age. He is the youngest Super Bowl MVP and NFL MVP to ever play the game of football. So that's pretty amazing in and of itself. And that's even before you look at his numbers, Youngest to ever throw 50 and 5K. And now he has a Super Bowl championship. So the biggest concern right now for Chiefs fans and the Chiefs brass, do we sign Patrick Mahomes to a $200 million contract? Now, there's no question he's earned it. That's not the problem. The problem is deciding whether or not this is going to be the best move for the team going forward. Now, Patrick Mahomes has come out and said himself, of course he wants to get paid and he wants to make money and secure his future. But at the same time, he doesn't want to be a hindrance on the team, and he doesn't want his salary to affect his winning chances. So, my stance on the whole thing is this. Either way you look at it, there really isn't a wrong answer. Patrick Mahomes deserves to be the highest paid player in NFL history. But, as many have argued, and mostly because of Tom Brady, getting paid doesn't always equal success. In fact, more recently, the guys who get paid don't really win. Now, I want to take a look at this. For the past 10 years, the past 10 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, let's take a look at their salaries and who's had the highest. So, the past 10 Super Bowl champions, and Tom Brady's won a couple of them, so we'll just repeat his name a couple times. So, of course, this year, Patrick Mahomes. Last year, Tom Brady, Nick Foles, Tom Brady again, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, Joe Flacco, Eli Manning, and finally Drew Brees. Now, If I had to guess, and I'm sure if you guys had to guess, who was the highest paid quarterback out of those last 10 Super Bowls, I'm not sure, with just an uneducated guess, anyone would guess that it was Eli Manning. So the sample size is quite large. That's a fifth of the Super Bowls ever played. None of those guys besides Eli Manning was one of the top paid at the position. And might I add, at the time, Eli had signed an extension of 4 years and upwards of $85 million, and he had around, I think, $54 million guaranteed. If we look at the contracts now, the standard has almost become over $100 million guaranteed. So let's look at the top paid guys during these past few Super Bowls. Actually, I'll go through the past 10. So I'll do the top 2 paid quarterbacks for the past 10 years. So it starts Donovan McNabb, Peyton Manning. Mark Sanchez, Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning, Sam Bradford. Eli Manning, Matt Stafford. Eli Manning, Big Ben. Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers. Eli again, Big Ben. Joe Flacco and Carson Palmer. Jimmy G and Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford and Aaron Rodgers. Not one of those quarterbacks was at the highest paid position when they won a Super Bowl. So those quarterbacks have touched, that highest paid slot, but they didn't win a Super Bowl when they were the highest paid. So it's very, very interesting. Even when Eli Manning won, he was one of the highest paid, but he wasn't the highest paid quarterback. Another interesting fact I want to look at, guys, since Steve Young in 1994, only 3 other quarterbacks have eaten up more than 10% or 10% of their team's salary cap. One of them, of course, was Eli Manning. That was in 2011. Peyton Manning was in 2006, and Brett Favre was in 1996. So it's really, really interesting to look at. Just because you have this amazing quarterback who deserves a ton of money, that is not going to guarantee your success. See, the problem is, there's a hard cap. The more money you give to the quarterback, the less money there is for everyone else. And I mean, it's like that with every position. The more money you just give to a single player, there's less for everyone else to eat from. And unfortunately, well, it makes sense. Guys want to get paid. They want to secure their future for life after football. Their life isn't only football, and the majority of their lives will be spent not on a football team. Or not on an NFL team, I should say. So, it's tough. While I want to retain Patrick Mahomes for as long as possible, and of course give him what he deserves, I know that it's just as important to keep guys like Chris Jones on the team. Now, we've already seen Chris Jones, that situation has been a little iffy. There is a little bit of, I wouldn't say bad blood, but definitely some unhappiness from Chris Jones' side about getting the franchise tag, because he knows that, the team has to pay Patrick Mahomes, so therefore I have to suffer. It's a complex situation, but it's one that has to get handled and dealt with. Patrick Mahomes deserves to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. But if Brett Veach doesn't figure out a way to handle the salary cap, in a team-friendly way or in a way that's good for both sides, then the Chiefs' window to win Super Bowls is going to be much shorter than we initially thought. Now, the only good thing is most of the skill players, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, they're under contract for a while. Tyrann Mathieu, Frank Clark, we have those guys for a while. It's just going to get, later on, it's going to get really scary trying to re-sign or retain those guys when Patrick Mahomes is eating up, $40 million a year. So my stance on that whole thing, of course, I believe that people should get paid what they deserve. But I do think it's necessary to, if you're a leader, to look at your team and say, is this going to be the best to win? Because I get it, guys. At the end of the day, it's about their lives. It's about their money. But also, you came into the NFL, your main goal is to win Super Bowls. So you kind of want to do anything you can. Tom Brady, while a great example of someone who is, taking less money so that his team can succeed, is also, it's very circumstantial. Tom Brady, like I said before, has openly admitted that one of the reasons that he takes less money is because his spouse is also a multimillionaire. And, a lot of guys in the NFL don't necessarily have that luxury where the person that they're with or married to can also bring in a huge chunk of money. So we do have to think about it like that as well. Of course, Tom Brady had his team in mind, but if he was single or if his wife wasn't making nearly as much money as she is, would he have taken less money? And it's interesting to see now. Tom Brady wants to win Super Bowls at this point in time as well, but this time around he's not trying to save anyone any money. So we do have to look at that as well. Why is that? I mean, could it be just because he's won 6 Super Bowls, so he's saying, well, I want to make money now and win a Super Bowl? Or is it because he thinks he might have made a mistake? A lot of people have made the case that New England really didn't spend as much money as Tom Brady was saving them on signing guys to bigger contracts and retaining guys over the years. I mean, actually, we've seen them let go of a lot of top talent because they didn't want to pay them, even when Tom Brady wasn't getting paid what he deserved and clearly what he earned as a quarterback for the New England Patriots. So it's definitely a complex situation, but by all means, you do anything you can to keep Patrick Mahomes. A lot of people think just write him a blank check and whatever he wants, you give it to him. But it's a little more complicated than that. So we'll see what happens. The one thing that does concern me is that we don't know when this contract is going to get done. The Chiefs have been pretty wishy-washy. They say, this is a top priority. This is the thing we want to get taken care of as soon as possible. Yet, we don't even hear about any offers. We don't hear about contract talks. So it's a pretty interesting situation. Hopefully they get it all figured out, because keeping the team together is what can, secure a dynasty. When you don't have, the world's best coach on your side, you don't have certain scandals on your side, and when you don't have such, amazing connections between offensive coordinator and quarterback like Tom Brady. So it's all very interesting. Chiefs have a chance to build something special in Kansas City and to start their own dynasty. We'll just have to hope that it works out with the money and that everyone's contracts can line up perfectly and keep this thing going. So, all right, guys. With that, we're gonna take a short break. But when we get back, we're gonna get into some fantasy football and So just stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We just got done talking Patrick Mahomes' huge contract potential, Tom Brady, how he used to take less money. But now I want to move on to some more fantasy football-related stuff and talk about, if you guys should be drafting a QB in the first round or even in the early rounds, and if that's worth it or not. So to start, I want to touch on the fact that in a ton of mock drafts that I was doing last year, and I was in 3 leagues last year, and every single one of them, Patrick Mahomes was taken in the first round. Now, it's understandable. Mahomes came off of a year where he had 50 touchdowns and 5,000 yards. It was absolutely absurd. But is this actually sustainable? Is this viable? Is this worth it from a fantasy standpoint? Let's take a look at this. Patrick Mahomes, on average, was drafted with the 10th to 12th overall pick. And this year, he finished as fantasy's number 7 quarterback. Now, of course, he did get injured in the middle of the Denver game, and he missed 2 games after that. But his 22-point per game average was still less than Lamar Jackson, and not very much more than Dak Prescott's points per game. So think about that. Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson were drafted multiple rounds later than Patrick Mahomes, but finished just as well as he did. So a lot of people wasted that first round pick. It's highly coveted on a quarterback that they didn't necessarily need to. Excuse me. And if you're in a PPR league, the most important position you need to get, is a pass catching running back or a wide receiver. And if you wasted that spot on Patrick Mahomes, I'm not so sure that you won your league. And to add on top of that, Patrick Mahomes got injured. So a lot of people wasted their first round pick on a guy who is, he was right on par with Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott, and who missed a couple games. So looking back on it, it wasn't the best decision to take Patrick Mahomes in the first round. Granted, would I have done it? Maybe. But I have an extreme bias as he's my favorite player in the league right now, and my favorite team is the Kansas City Chiefs. It's not a wise way to draft. The main thing that everyone has to keep in mind is to not get caught up in the recency bias. Every year is different. Todd Gurley bounced back from one of the worst seasons of his career to be like fantasy's top running back. So, we have to think about that. And of course, and then now this year, after he got that huge contract and amazing year, he had a down year again. So it's hard to just assume on a year-to-year basis to look at a guy's stats from one year and say he's going to be just as good in fantasy the next year. So keep that stuff in mind, because I have a strong feeling that this year, the new Patrick Mahomes of the fantasy draft is going to be Lamar Jackson. Now I get it. Lamar Jackson is basically a running back and a quarterback smashed into one. So that's why I want to take a look at him and, talk about maybe he might be worth that first round pick. So if we take a look at the top fantasy scores from last season, in the top three we have Christian McCaffrey with 471, Lamar Jackson with 415, and Michael Thomas with 374. Now, the gap between all three of those is pretty significant. But I want to look at something even more interesting. Guys, last season, Patrick Mahomes was fantasy's top scorer with 417, which would be good for second this season. But if you notice, even though it's just 2 points, he scored more than Lamar Jackson this year, and Lamar Jackson had a ton of yards on the ground and all those rushing touchdowns. So it's very interesting to think about. I know a lot of people are going to get caught up in the craze. Lamar Jackson is changing the game. He's setting records just like Mahomes did. And I have a feeling that a lot of people are going to prematurely draft Lamar Jackson in the first round and waste that pick yet again. My advice would be, especially if you have one of those early picks, stick to the norm, stick to the tradition, and get a running back like Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey he's honestly my top pick to stay the most consistent. Even though he might not finish as fantasy's top scorer yet again, if we look at it, last year he was in the top 3, and this year he was the top scorer by a mile. Do I think the Carolina Panthers are going to get that much better? No. Do I think they're going to add that many skill positions that are going to take away from Christian McCaffrey's role? No. So, guys, don't look for Lamar Jackson to necessarily be, fantasy's hottest prospect. Still keep it, especially if you're paying PPR, on someone like Christian McCaffrey or like Michael Thomas, who gets an insane amount of targets and an insane amount of receptions. Don't necessarily just prematurely draft a quarterback because he's going to score a lot of points. If we go past Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, and Deshaun Watson are at 4, 5, and 6 respectively, and are only separated. Dak Prescott has 337, and Deshaun Watson had 320. So it's only a 17-point separation between those three guys, all three great fantasy quarterbacks. So just because you don't get Lamar Jackson doesn't mean your season's gone or lost. Of course, you can still get someone like Patrick Mahomes. Remember, someone like Jameis Winston, who finished in the top 5 for fantasy quarterbacks. It's not just about, snagging fantasy's best quarterbacks, because at the end of the day, you only get one of those. You get 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers, and of course, there's other super flex leagues, 3 wide receiver leagues, of course. If you are going to grab a quarterback, my suggestion would be to wait on it. Let the other guy waste his pick on Lamar Jackson or waste his pick on Patrick Mahomes and pick up someone that he missed out on, a running back or a wide receiver. I'm not quite sure that Lamar Jackson can repeat the tremendous success he had this year, because as we all know, when people get film on you, it gets tougher and tougher. Remember, this season, people thought that Patrick Mahomes was figured out. He lost that game to the Colts. He lost the game to the Texans. They were back-to-back losses, and everyone was thinking, hey, you just play man coverage, and, you're going to give him trouble, and he's not going to put up as many points. Now, of course, he adjusted to it, but expect the same sort of thing to happen to Lamar Jackson next year. Also, I have a strong feeling that Lamar Jackson won't be running as much as he did last year, and he definitely would not be running with as much reckless abandon. He was just running into contact, always trying to juke guys out, and I think that next year the Ravens are going to try and limit that, have him slide more, have not as many options, and put more of the load on the actual running backs of the team, because they have two great running backs. Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards are a great duo, and it seemed like every time Gus Edwards touched the ball, he picked up about 10 yards. So the Ravens might stray away from, the predictable, option play. Lamar Jackson can take this, Mark Ingram can take this, and they might have Lamar Jackson open up more as a passer, which of course is going to bode well for Marquise Brown and the other receivers on the Ravens. So, all in all, guys, do not waste a first-round draft pick on a quarterback. I mean, unless you're a diehard Ravens fan, and I do not suggest drafting in fantasy football as just, a fan of certain players, because that can lead to, you drafting a bunch of players from one team who all share the same bye week, and it can also lead to you drafting guys that you don't necessarily need. But I mean, if you're going to do it, I can't stop you. I would just advise against it. Quarterbacks aren't necessarily worth first-round picks. There's plenty of quarterbacks. There's not a significant drop-off like there is at tight end. And like I said, I expect the Ravens to open up Lamar Jackson's passing game more, and of course it's going to lead to less fantasy points. Rushing every 10 yards is a point, and throwing 25 yards is a point. So there's going to be a significant drop-off in his fantasy points scored. Unless he's going to put up 50 touchdowns and 5,000 yards, don't expect him to be as successful as he was this year. Expect him to be more around that, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, 340, 350 range. And if you're a guy who drafted Patrick Mahomes in the first round of last year, don't make that mistake again, guys. I drafted Deshaun Watson in round 5, and he did basically just as well as Patrick Mahomes did. Granted, he did get injured, and that's mostly the reason why, but hey, it's what happened, and we're not going to talk about hypotheticals, right? Like I said, the fantasy football season just opened up, so be smart, guys. Do a ton of mock drafts and see what people are doing, because those trends tend to catch on. Of course, it depends, who you're drafting with, who you're creating a league with, and how much they're into fantasy football. But just stay ahead of the curve. Notice the trends that people are doing, what they're drafting, and you can plan to counter against that, especially if people are going to be taking Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes in the first round. You're going to be able to steal some solid picks and win your league that way. So, with that, guys, we're going to take a short break, but stay tuned, because when we're back, we're going to talk Tom Brady, the possible GM, that and more. Stay tuned.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Alright guys, now I want to get into some more Tom Brady, but a slightly different note. Recently it was reported by Diana Russini of ESPN that Brady has two big wants in in regards to what he's going to get from the team that signs him or may sign him in free agency. One of those things is control over the roster, and another one of those things is that he needs to be part of the play calling on offense. So basically what teams can expect is that they have to sign Tom Brady, the quarterback, Tom Brady, the GM, and Tom Brady, the offensive play caller. Now, if this report is to be believed, it's absolutely unheard of in the history of the NFL. I mean, no player has really had that much power. So what I want to talk about is basically how that shakes things up in free agency, because I think that's going to affect the interest that teams have in Tom Brady. So if we look at it this way, it's kind of understandable why Brady wants this. You know what I mean? He probably only has 1 or 2 seasons left. He's, we know how old he is. He's going to be 43 by the time the season starts. And I would assume that basically he's saying, if I'm leaving the stability that's been New England for the past 20 years, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to a place where I'm not going to waste my time, we're not going to be losing games, and we have a real shot at winning the Super Bowl. So in that regard, if he's calling the plays and he's controlling the roster, he can make the team exactly how he wants it, in the way that he feels best gives him the chances to win a Super Bowl. But that's pretty complex. I mean, a GM basically is going to have to give up his job for 2 years, and I don't know if owners are going to be so accepting of that as well. It works out fine for a GM because technically if it goes wrong, then they can just put the blame on Tom Brady, right? And, they say they took a chance and it didn't work out, but if the owner also approved that, then it's not really on them. And, I mean, I guess it could technically work out if Brady goes to a team, let's say he goes to the Colts or he goes to the Chargers where they don't have the best offensive line. He can tell the Colts, hey, I think we should draft this receiver for me, or he can tell the Chargers, hey, let's draft or trade for or sign this offensive lineman because we have so many weapons here. Yes, it could work out well, but the thing is, that means that whatever team that he's about to go to is going to be all in for the next 2 years and just planning just for the short term in which they have Tom Brady. Now, that's pretty scary. Typically when teams plan for the very short term, it doesn't end up too well for the franchise long term. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, if you guys recall, Mike Ditka traded his whole draft away for one player. That year, they had a losing season and Mike Ditka got fired. So, it's not really in a franchise's best interest just to plan for one Super Bowl and then be terrible for the next 50 years. In terms of how this affects, what teams are going to want Brady, I'm not sure that, a team like the 49ers, a team like the Colts, a team like the Titans is going to want that. Maybe the Buccaneers because they've been such a struggling franchise for so long, and because Bruce Arians does have a history, he let Big Ben call plays, and he has that history to do that, but it's just tough. Brady has revolutionized the position of quarterback. He's, of course, revolutionized how we think about quarterback contracts and whether they should take less money, but I'm not sure that at this point in the game, at 43 years old, teams are going to want to take on one, of course, a 43-year-old quarterback, but one who also wants to play GM and who wants to play, offensive coordinator. It's all getting very complex and very interesting, but at this point, it seems like less and less teams are going to want Tom Brady, and that he's more likely to stay with the Patriots than to go somewhere else. We know that if he stays with the Patriots, he knows he's not getting any of that power. He knows he's not going to be GM, and he's not going to be play caller, but that's fine with him because it's been working in New England for so long. Going somewhere else and getting all of that power seems very unlikely, so the team that picks him up is going to have to be agreeing to a lot and be giving him a ton of money. So it just doesn't seem attractive for another team unless they know for sure that they can win a Super Bowl within the next 2 years, and that's never guaranteed. Brady could get injured his first year with a new team. He's old and the hits hurt more and more the older you get. So it's a huge risk for a team, and if it doesn't turn out well, then it could spell disaster for quite a long time. So, guys, this could be one of the reasons that Tom Brady and the Patriots have been having all these complications and so much friction. He could be asking at this point, he could be asking for it, but he knows he's not going to get that GM power, away from Bill Belichick, and he's not going to be calling plays. So maybe he's like, well, maybe I'll try to find somewhere where they're going to give me that respect and that power. In that case, then I guess the only real place that does make sense is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I really don't expect many other teams to be willing to do this. Diana Rossini also commented that she's spoken to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they've openly said they're willing to give Brady whatever he wants and whatever he needs. So while I don't think realistically it makes sense without giving someone that much power, at this point in time, if that's truly what Brady wants and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are all for it, then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the perfect match. I don't know if it's wise. I really don't believe so. But they have the money for Brady. They have the offensive weapons. And, hey, who knows? If he goes there and says, hey, they end up drafting a stud on defense, they could be a force to be reckoned with. But, of course, it could end up very, very badly. So we'll just have to see, of course, like with everything with Tom Brady. There's so many layers to this, so many different points of view. But it's always worth talking about. I know you guys are probably getting tired of hearing about Tom Brady, but it's something huge. And it's definitely going to affect fantasy football, so it's definitely something you want to keep your eye on. But it just gets more and more interesting as the days go by. The only way I see Tom Brady now staying in New England is if he gets reassured that, he's not going to get that power, of course, but if he gets reassured that they're going to, seek out players that he's interested in or seek out players at skill position that he needs, that's the only way he stays in New England. I think if Tampa Bay offers him all of that power, there's no way he turns it down. There's no reason to stay in New England if he's not going to get anything that he wants and he's not going to get the money that he wants. Why not go and basically run a team, be the quarterback, and have a shot at winning the Super Bowl? I mean, if you look at it in that regard, it makes perfect sense. Do I think it's going to work out that way? Not quite. If it does happen, it's definitely going to change the game. Other players are going to look at this and say, hey, I'm just as valuable to this franchise as Tom Brady is to that franchise. So, this could become a situation in which other players follow suit. Everyone argues that players should be doing what Tom Brady does in regards to his training, how hard he works, taking less money for contracts and all that stuff. So why not follow it up with, hey, Tom Brady, he did this and this, and if it works out well, oh, for sure, you can expect other quarterbacks and other players who feel they're that important to a franchise and a team, to ask for that sort of power, in the decision making, in regards to the roster and the play calling. So it's very interesting stuff. It could end up shaking up the league and shaking up the position of QB even more than it already has been, and it's definitely something to keep your eye on, guys. It's seeming like it's more and more realistic every day. I thought Tampa Bay definitely was not on my top list to land Tom Brady just a few days ago, guys. Just a few days ago, I was saying, the Titans, the Chargers. But now with this new report coming out, it seems those are a few pegs lower on the list, and Tampa Bay is sort of a sleeping giant in this whole race for Tom Brady. So, like I said, guys, keep your eyes peeled, your ears open. The Tom Brady cycle, it's not over and feels like it's just beginning now. So we'll keep our eyes on that, and of course we'll stay talking about it with more news and all the updates that come out. Right now, though, we're going to take a short break. After, we're going to talk what all this Tampa Bay Buccaneer and Tom Brady buzz means for Jameis Winston. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be back soon.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Vargas. Now, we just got done talking the Tom Brady, Tampa Bay Buccaneer buzz, and so now I want to talk about Jameis Winston. So, I argued that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should probably, not give up all hope on Jameis Winston. He showed us how prolific he can be on offense, and while, yes, he's a turnover machine, I feel like that's something that can be fixed, and there's just no way he would throw 30 interceptions again. Now, though, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the hots for Tom Brady. They're ready to go all in. They're ready to give him GM power and play-calling power. So where does this leave Jameis Winston? Now, there's a reason that in the past I've argued for Jameis Winston staying in Tampa Bay. Of course, he's familiar with the offense. He can throw it all over the yard. He can put up 5,000 yards in a season. But more importantly, I want him to stay there because if he doesn't, at best, he's going to be a backup QB. And then all of that potential that we saw this year is basically going to go out the window. Now, just think about it this way. Why would another team see a guy, he threw 5,000 yards, but he threw 30 interceptions. Why would they want that to be their starting guy over what they have at the moment? Tampa Bay didn't make playoffs. They haven't been anything special in a number of years with Jameis Winston behind center. And, a struggling team would rather just struggle with their guy who's not throwing 30 interceptions. They'd rather draft a new quarterback. They'd rather trade for a different one, sign another in free agency. So, if Jameis Winston leaves the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, at the moment, I don't see him doing much for the rest of his career. Unless he has some sort of rebirth like Ryan Tannehill did. But I don't see it happening. If Jameis Winston leaves the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, guys, he's not going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback. I'm not sure you should even draft him if he's not a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. It just seems like one of those things that if they don't have faith in him anymore, then nobody else will because they were the last ones to have faith in him in the first place. The only ones, I should say. So, if Tom Brady ends up on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it's pretty much all said and done for Jameis Winston unless he can steal a starting role from a struggling starter on another team. But I don't know many teams that are going to want a turnover machine as their backup quarterback. Now, free agency in general is a risky business. We saw last year, the Jets signed Le'Veon Bell and he had his worst career year. So, these teams are making risks in general and it just seems like Jameis Winston is almost double a risk. Because, yes, he's a free agent, of course, he could always flop and he's already, severely struggling with turnovers and he has the record for pick sixes in a season. So, it's tough. But I want to move on to another risky free agent. One in sort of a similar situation. Ryan Tannehill. Now, if Ryan Tannehill is moved from the Tennessee Titans, I'm not sure what the future holds. Ryan Tannehill on the Miami Dolphins was night and day compared to what he is on the Tennessee Titans. In fact, guys, if we look at his numbers, he was actually one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Last season, and he didn't even start 16 games, Ryan Tannehill led the league in passer rating, average yards per attempt, and he had 70% completion. That's sort of absurd. If you give him a full 16-game slate with the yards per game that he was averaging, he has a much better season than Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, he had 22 touchdowns and 6 picks in 12 games played. If we look at someone like, the arguable GOAT, Tom Brady had 24 touchdowns and 8 picks, and Ryan Tannehill with 22 and 6. He's really not that far off of someone like Tom Brady at this point in time. I mean, if we look at these other guys, look, Kirk Cousins, 26 and 6. Deshaun Watson, 26 touchdowns, 12 picks. Patrick Mahomes, of course, he missed a few games, 26 and 5. I mean, guys, he's keeping up with these guys who, Patrick Mahomes, we regard him as elite. Deshaun Watson, we regard him as elite. Matt Ryan had 26 touchdowns and 14 picks. So he's not that far off. Of course, we have the, Lamar Jackson with 36, Russell Wilson with 30, Dak Prescott 30 and up. But, no one is, saying Ryan Tannehill is elite, but he's putting up amazing numbers. Unfortunately, I feel like if he leaves that system where he can sit behind that tank that is Derrick Henry and really, really make use of the play action, I feel like he's going to be nowhere near as prolific. On the Dolphins, only 2 other times did he pass for over 22 touchdowns, and remember, he was starting all 16 games. On the Titans, he set career highs in rating and completion percentage, and a career low in interceptions thrown. So right now, the Tennessee Titans are the perfect spot for Ryan Tannehill. They're working in a way where he can do exactly what he's comfortable with, and there's not much pressure on him. No one expects Ryan Tannehill to go out there and win a game. He's riding on the back of Derrick Henry just like the rest of the team is. If the defense keeps playing the way they're playing and can create some turnovers to give them short fields, they can run the ball, manage the game, and Ryan Tannehill just has to be a great game manager. Of course, he's going to take the occasional deep shot that's going to be wide open because defenses are so scared of Derrick Henry. But, there's a lot of good potential here in Tennessee. I think if he goes somewhere else, he's sort of bound to fail. I don't know. This whole situation kind of reminds me of when Case Keenum was on the Vikings and they went on that miracle run, the Minneapolis Miracle. That happened. They were so close to a Super Bowl. Of course, they got absolutely annihilated by the Eagles. However, Case Keenum sort of felt right. Their defense was very solid. He could manage the game and not make mistakes, and he had a lot of grit. He was always going to fight for the wins. Of course, he wasn't an elite guy by any means. He's not he's not in the top rankings of quarterbacks, but he could get the job done. They ship him out. Kirk Cousins comes in, and haven't heard about Case Keenum since, basically. I understand he had some injury concerns this year, but when he was out there, he wasn't doing anything really special with the Redskins. Of course, they're not the best offense, but still, I have a feeling that Ryan Tannehill as a free agent will most likely end up on a team that's very desperate for a quarterback, and those teams usually don't have that much talent. So this could end up being bad. But, of course, we'll see what happens, and if the team's not landing Tom Brady, I'm sure they'll franchise tag Ryan Tannehill and hopefully sign Derrick Henry to the extension he deserves, and they can try and go repeat what they did and get one step further and make it to that Super Bowl. After all, Ryan Tannehill helped lead that team to an AFC championship game. So, of course, we'll see what happens, but again, another risky QB situation, and another situation in which I believe if that QB leaves, he's not going to do as well. And again, what that means for fantasy is if Ryan Tannehill goes to a team that, doesn't have a strong run game and it's not similar to the Titans, I don't think that he can take a team over the top as the elite guys can. If we put Patrick Mahomes on any team, we have faith in him. If you see Russell Wilson, we've seen it already. Guys like Russell Wilson with no help on the offense still put up amazing fantasy numbers and carry their team. Ryan Tannehill's not that guy. Ryan Tannehill needs to stay on the Titans to be fantasy relevant. And if he doesn't, guys, don't expect him to be. But with that, guys, I can't wait for the free agency period to open up. It's just going to be a whirlwind. I think a lot of things are going to get shaken up, and there's a lot of really fantasy relevant players who are slated to be free agents. Dak Prescott, Tom Brady, Ryan Tannehill has a lot of potential. Amari Cooper is, slated to be a free agent. Nothing's set yet, and he was one of the top fantasy receivers last year. So it's all just, it's pretty crazy. Guys like Austin Hooper, who was a top fantasy tight end. Phillip Rivers still doesn't have a team, so these are things that we're going to definitely want to keep an eye on, and not to mention the league's leading rusher, Derrick Henry, still doesn't have a contract. So, of course, we're going to keep you guys posted with all things offseason, all things free agency. We'll definitely keep talking about that every week as more news comes out. But with that, guys, we're going to take a short little break, and when we get back, we're going to get into our final segment before closing out the show. So stay tuned, guys. We got a little bit more coming for you.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Alright guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Alright, we're here, our final segment of the day, and what I want to start doing is, I want to make this a recurring thing to give you guys 3 wishes for, the football season, or fantasy football in general, and I think it's something that'd be cool to do at the end of every show to wrap it up, and so let's just get right into it actually. So basically what I'm going to do is just go through 3 wishes that I have, and tell you guys why I wish for these things to happen. So, wish number 1. I wish for Austin Hooper to sign with the Green Bay Packers or the Atlanta Falcons. Now, why do I want him to sign with the Green Bay Packers? Well, for one, the Green Bay Packers finally let go of Jimmy Graham. Secondly, Aaron Rodgers needs a prolific tight end he can throw to. Now, the offense of the Packers is not as potent as the offense of the Falcons, with Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, Devontae Freeman in the backfield, but I do believe that if the Packers at least have someone opposite Devontae Adams that's not some undrafted free agent or undrafted rookie, that they can be even more lethal. And 1, we know Austin Hooper's going to produce. 2, the tight end position in fantasy football is so scarce. Anywhere Austin Hooper goes, he's probably going to be one of the top tight ends in fantasy football. If he comes to the Packers though, he will also boost Aaron Rodgers' fantasy value and in turn boost Devontae Adams' fantasy value. If Aaron Rodgers has that, what they thought Jimmy Graham would be is, that big box out kind of tight end for the red zone. If Austin Hooper can just score touchdowns for Aaron Rodgers, win-win. If Austin Hooper doesn't end up on the Packers though, I don't think I would want to see him anywhere else but the Atlanta Falcons. I think one of the bigger reasons that he does thrive in Atlanta's offense is because Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. There's so many other distractions, and Julio Jones demands double teams that Austin Hooper can break loose and get free. He's not facing many double teams, and he can just find holes in the zone pretty easily when Julio Jones is commanding so much attention. But again, that could be one of the reasons why the Falcons let him go. They don't believe, that he's some sort of elite talent, and he thrives mostly because of Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. So if they do let him go, then I would want to see him on the Packers. If not, though, the best fit would be the Atlanta Falcons. Wish number 2. Mitchell Trubisky is out as the Bears quarterback. Now, I know it's pretty harsh, and it might even be a little controversial, but Mitchell Trubisky has not panned out as the Bears would have hoped. He was drafted above the likes of Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. We all know how that turned out. Mitchell Trubisky is also playing for a coach in Matt Nagy that helped usher in Patrick Mahomes to be such a prolific passer. I believe that with a more dynamic, more explosive, and just better quarterback overall, Matt Nagy can take that Chicago Bears offense to another level, and it can finally match the defense. At one point in time, it just felt like I was watching the Chicago Bears to watch that dominant defense score points, for one, and provide exciting plays that just weren't being made on offense. Mitchell Trubisky is okay at best, and I just feel like at this point in time, the rest of his career is just going to be, he's going to be a journeyman, a backup guy, sort of a Josh McCown. He does have the potential in him, but he's not realizing it, and the Chicago Bears need help soon before the defense eventually falls apart, or players get, they start aging, they can't keep all players. Khalil Mack has a massive contract, so I think just to give this, a second half to this wish, if they do let him go, I would love to see Cam Newton in the Bears uniform. I feel like at this point in time, Cam and the Panthers organization, it just doesn't feel right. It feels like that team right now is Christian McCaffrey's. I feel like that team should be building around Christian McCaffrey, and Cam Newton is, I think, too big of a personality to sort of share that team, if you will. I feel like after the injuries, they saw what Christian McCaffrey could do. They could win games without Cam Newton, and Kyle Allen wasn't doing too bad to begin. of course, we know how that went, but drafting a quarterback might be in the future for the Carolina Panthers instead of keeping Cam Newton. Also, if they cut him now, it's not like they would be taking a huge salary hit. I think Cam Newton on the Bears could definitely be explosive. They could start using his legs more often as they started to use Mitchell Trubisky towards the middle and end of the season, and Cam Newton could do that better, along with, just more accurate throwing and the ability to take over a game and be that star. So that's my second wish. My third and final wish for this offseason, the Kansas City Chiefs draft Jonathan Taylor with the 32nd overall pick in the first round of the 2020 NFL Draft. Guys, I know that people still think, it's true. The biggest need for the Kansas City Chiefs is defense. We need corners. We need a linebacker. But we also need a running back. And, of course, I have a bias. I'm a guy that likes big offenses. I've been spoiled by Patrick Mahomes and this amazing Chiefs offense, high-flying, super fast Legion of Zoom. But we are in desperate need of a running back. I understand that we can win a Super Bowl without one. But I feel with the defense that we have right now, we have, Tyrann Mathieu, Frank Clark, Chris Jones just got tagged. So we have all of those key guys coming back next year. I feel, we could sign some mid-tier, lower-tier free agents and make it work with them. Steve Spagnuolo was, we succeeded on defense with Charvarius Ward, Rashad Fenton, and cycling Tyrann Mathieu into the cornerback mix. Also, we did have Kendall Fuller, but, he wasn't playing up to that elite level that he was playing it when he was in the slot over in Washington. So we don't necessarily need huge names on defense. And I feel like if Jonathan Taylor comes to the NFL and he's as explosive as he was in college, it would be a serious, serious problem. More of a problem than it already is for NFL defenses to cover. He also looks great running routes for a running back. And could you imagine the fantasy value that he would have on a team like the Kansas City Chiefs? Not only would he be getting tons of points, but that's even more points for Patrick Mahomes. And it's going to open up the playbook for, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Every team this year knew we were passing the ball. No one was scared of our run attack. Yes, of course, we ran when we needed to, and in the Super Bowl we used it more often. But if you can have a threatening running game, like when we had Kareem Hunt, it seemed that any week, any given game, any person that played a skill position for the Kansas City Chiefs could put up 20 points or more in fantasy. And it was happening. I mean, you guys saw the Rams game in which we scored 51 points. Almost everyone on offense had over 15 to 20 fantasy points. So I know it might seem crazy, but I think if the Kansas City Chiefs draft Jonathan Taylor or even, any solid running back in this draft, another Super Bowl run and win seems almost destined. So those are my top 3 wishes for today's show, guys. I hope the Packers finally get a tight end. I hope the Bears finally find their quarterback. And I hope that the Kansas City Chiefs finally find their replacement for Kareem Hunt after these seasons. Now, I want to keep this thing going. I like this as a new segment. As the season goes on, of course, we're going to have, wishes for fantasy football, wishes for certain matchups, certain trades, things of that nature. So definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments, and we'll keep this segment going. But with that, guys, of course, I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Guys, as always, I want to ask that you remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review, because that really helps us. You guys can let us know what you hate along with what you love, because that also really helps us. We need the constructive criticism. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, that'll be great as well. As always, guys, thank you and have a good night. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.